Welcome to another sermon from the Lewes Church of Christ. And now, here's Mark.
Have you ever heard of the Book of Questions? The Book of Questions. It's an interesting book. The Book of Questions is just a book of questions. And the Book of Questions is designed to just start some great conversation. You might use it as a family around a dinner table, just ask a question and talk about it. You may use it with a group of friends just to start some great conversation, maybe some deeper conversation. The Book of Questions. It's interesting. Now, I want to warn you, if you want to use it with your family, there are some questions that aren't child appropriate, and you need to exercise a little wisdom on that. But they are interesting. For example, if you could use a voodoo doll to hurt somebody, who would you choose? Now, and again, it might not be appropriate, but you already have an answer, don't you? Yep. I know who said that. Anyway, another question. If you could wake up tomorrow having gained a really special ability, what would it be? That's a good question. Interesting question. How about this one? If you could remove the vocal cords of a person for a year, who would you choose? Now that ain't right, but it's amazing how easy you have answers already. Now, preachers do not count. Preachers are excluded from that one. I'm amazed in that book of how many of the questions revolve around money. For example, would you for $20,000, go without bathing, brushing your teeth, or combing your hair for 3 months, and you're not allowed to explain the situation? For $20,000. I have 3 teenage boys that probably would volunteer to do that for free. How about this one, the classic? If you were to win $2 million in the lottery tomorrow, how would you spend it? You ever fantasize about that one? Now that one's not really as hypothetical as you might think. Do you realize the average American in the next 35 years will have managed $2 million? More than. Today, we are going to conclude a 2-part sermon series that we began last week, Ownership Rights. We've been talking about ownership rights, and this ownership rights series has been coming from a parable of Jesus that he told in Matthew chapter 25. Now, in that parable, the parable basically begins with this master, this owner. He was going to take a long journey. Right before he goes on the journey, he decides he was going to call 3 of his servants in, and he would entrust them with some of his money, his resources, his property. Now, to one of the servants, he gave 5 bags of gold. To another servant, he gives 2 bags of gold, and to a third servant, he gives only 1 bag of gold. And then he goes on a long journey. Now, that's as far as we made it last week. That's as far as we got. But it was good because we learned some very valuable lessons. First of all, we realized that it all belongs to him. It all belongs to the master. Therefore, what we have has really been given as a blessing. Therefore, we ought to be grateful. And then we learned, because it all is his, he has the right to allocate it as however he sees fit. Therefore, we ought to be content. And then we learned that because it's all his, because he's the owner of all, he actually has the right to direct us in how we use his resources. Therefore, I think we ought to be obedient. We're talking about a theology of ownership. Man, get this right, and a whole lot of life makes sense. In fact, it eliminates a lot of stress when you get this right. It's ownership theology. He has all the rights. We have responsibilities. He has the rights. We have responsibilities. Today I want to focus on the rest of the story. Listen to the rest of the story. It gets interesting. After a really long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you've entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and enjoy your master's happiness. Then the man who received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid. And I went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew I harvest where I've not sown and gather where I've not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Wow. Bottom line, our master is someday going to return. And you and I will have to stand in front of him and give an account of what we did with what he's entrusted to us. We are accountable. Now, I think in order to really understand this parable, it is so important that we understand the context of this parable. The greater context of this parable is Matthew chapter 24 and chapter 25. In Matthew chapter 24 and chapter 25, we have an extended time, teaching time from Jesus, where he is spending a lot of time, extended time, telling us about his second coming. He's telling us about his second return, and he's telling us kind of what it's going to be like, and he's telling us what we can expect. And bottom line of it all is, the whole context is pointing to this fact: we need to be ready. We need to be ready. In fact, back in chapter 24, verse 44, look at this. Here's what Jesus says. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you do not expect him. Be ready. Our Master someday will return, and you and I will be called to stand before him, and we will have to give an account of how we've managed what he's given us. And he's hoping we'll be ready. Now, the truth is, you and I will have to stand and give an account for our whole lives. I mean, everything about our lives, we'll have to give an account. I just think it's interesting that in our parable, Jesus specifically uses the application of money. Why money? I think the way we handle our money is the most prominent reflection of our faith. How we manage our money is a pretty good gauge of what we really believe. Jesus said, where your treasure is, you know what he said, didn't you? That's where your heart will be. So I want you to know today that money is a test. It's a test. Do you remember when you were back in high school? You were back in high school and you're in the classroom and maybe you're kind of sitting toward the back of the class. Maybe you're lounged down in the chair a little bit. Your eyes are on the outside the window, and you're just daydreaming. You're not paying attention. Another classmate asks a question, and the way the teacher answers the question changes everything. The question is, will this be on the test? Now, if the teacher responds, no, you're not going to be tested on this material. This isn't going to be on the test. What do? You sink back, your eyes go out the window, and you don't pay a lick of attention, right? But if the teacher says, oh yeah, this is important. This is definitely going to be on the test. What do? Well, you sit up. Maybe you even lean forward. You start paying attention. You start taking notes like mad. Why? This is going to be on the test. You know what Jesus is doing in this parable? This is going to be on the test. What I'm telling you now really is going to matter then. What I'm telling you now is something you need to be prepared for. I'm telling you, this will be on the test. You better be ready. It's on the test. Now, what I love about this parable is that then Jesus gives us some examples, 3 examples that we can learn from. The first example is of the first guy who was given 5 bags of gold. I want you to look at him a little bit. He was given 5 bags of gold, 5 talents. Verse 20 says this. Look at verse 20. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. The word see in this text is emphatic. He's excited. He is so excited to show the master what has happened in his life. See, I've gained 5 more. It's emphatic. He's so excited. Why? He's ready. He knows he has done what the master has expected, and he's ready to take the test. Now, didn't you just love those fellow students when you were in school who were so ready to take the test? Anyway, they were ready to take the test. He was ready, see? Now, here's what I found interesting too. From last week's text, back to verse 16. Verse 16 says, the man who received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. I love that phrase, he went at once. No wasted time here. He went immediately. He went at once. It kind of gives us a little insight as to why the master gave him 5 talents in the first place, doesn't it? He went at once. Are you preparing for the test? Are you ready? Look at a couple of scripture references because the truth is we have to stand account. Look at this next verse. Matthew 25:21. I love the master's response. Well done. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been entrusted with small things. I will now give you many things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and enjoy your master's happiness. Well done. I love the master's response. You know, what we do now has consequences then. What we're doing right now has great potential to be rewarded greatly in eternity. That's so exciting. We know what's going to be on the test. And but can I just say, I don't want any of you to hear me say today from this passage that you can buy your way in. You can give away every penny you have and still not make it. You can't earn your way into heaven. You can't good your way to God. You can't buy your way in. You and I will only be saved by the grace of Jesus. However, as His servants that He's entrusted His property to, we still have to stand and give an account to what we've done with it. Look at this one, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, 2 Corinthians 5. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due him for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. All of us. Look at Revelation chapter 20. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Books? Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done as recorded in the books. It's all being recorded. Ooh. Look at this next one. Paul tells Timothy. Would you command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment? Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, get this, in this way they lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Can I remind you today that giving is investing? When you give in a way that advances the kingdom of Jesus Christ, you are investing in eternity. Giving is investing. John Wesley one time said, I value all things by the price they gain me in eternity. I like that. I value all things by the price they gain me in eternity. Friends, that's the lens we ought to be looking through. That's it. That's the lens we ought to be looking through. And a good question is simply this: how are you investing now for then? How are you investing now that's going to be rewarded then? Because we're going to stand account. Well, the first guy, he was given 5 talents, and he went at once and gained 5 more. And then the second guy was given 2 bags of gold, and he went and gained 2 more. And both of those guys received the same response: well done. Well done, good and faithful servants. Come on in. Enjoy your master's happiness. But there was a third guy, right? And that third guy, well, we can learn from his example of what not to do. Would you listen again to his story? Listen. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came, Master, he said, I know that you're a hard man, harvesting where you've not sown, gathering where you've not scattered seed. I was afraid. I went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I've not sown or gather where I've not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. You could have at least done that. Look at this. Take the talent from him. Give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has been given will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Yikes. I think it all comes down to this. What will you hear? Well done. Or wicked, lazy. What will you hear? Well done. Come on in. Or wicked, lazy, away. Friends, this isn't a time to bury our resources. This isn't a time to slouch back and start daydreaming. No, this is a time to sit up, lean forward, maybe take notes like crazy, and maybe start asking some good questions. Now, I didn't get these from the book of questions, but I found another list of questions that when I read through them, they just hurt. Can I give you some good questions? Would you consider taking your vacation budget this year and go on a mission trip or give it to a missionary? Good question. Would you be willing to go without cable for a year in order to sponsor a child in Haiti? Interesting question. Would you put off the purchase of a new car for another year in order to use that money to get you closer to practicing the principle of the tithe? That's a great question. Would you be willing to sell your extra vehicle in order to help a family who is planning to adopt? Would you pray about drawing a line about the amount of money that you're going to live on this year, and then commit to giving anything that you make over that line to the kingdom of Jesus Christ? That's a great question. How about this one? Would you consider spending the first 5 years of your retirement volunteering in a Christian mission? How about this? Would you commit this year to investing more in your eternity than you will your retirement? Just good questions. Interesting questions. The truth is this: someday, our master is going to return and going to ask us to give an account for our whole lives. And we're going to have to give an account with how I've spent His resources and how I've spent my time and where I've given my heart. You know what my prayer is for you? My prayer for every one of you is that you will hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
This has been a presentation of the Lewes Church of Christ. We are located at 15183 Coastal Highway, Milton, Delaware, 3 miles north of Lewes on Highway 1. Our service times are 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. every Sunday morning.